Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and assalamu alaikum. Today is Monday, December 4th. This is the 30th video in the Journey to Islam series, and this is the last video that I will do talking about what I went through on this part of the journey. The journey continues, but I have no more story to talk about, but I can reflect on what I've learned over these past 40 days. I learned a lot about why I think the way I do and what I learned in Islam that separates how I teach financial literacy. I think that I've read a lot of books and they all talk about giving after you have a sufficient amount of revenue to cover expenses, except for Robert Kiyosaki. And that's why I like to start with the Rich Dad, Poor Dad story. He said the difference between his rich dad and his poor dad, well, one of the differences was their level of giving. His poor dad never had enough money to be able to give, while his rich dad gave generously. The number one thing that I would emphasize to anybody who makes the journey to build wealth is strengthen your belief system. Believe that you are already wealthy. When I had no money, the community thought I was insane because I was saying I was wealthy then. Because wealth is not an amount. And that's why I like Sam Dojan. Sam Dojan wrote a book called Buy This, Not That. And he talked about the FIRE movement. And FIRE is financial independence, retire early. Over the last 20, 25 years, people have started to recognize that I don't need to retire at 65. Sam Dojan clearly says, and I think it's a great definition, that you can retire anytime your net worth is 20 times your income. So if your net worth is if your income is $25,000, then all you need is $500,000 and you can retire at any age. If your income is $40,000, 20 times 40,000 is $800,000. And that's different from Rachel Rodgers, who wrote in We Should All Be Millionaires that we should all be millionaires. But you don't need to be a millionaire to retire. What you have to do is make sure you manage your expenses. That's why I recognize now how the journey to Islam was intentional in showing me how to use discipline in my life. And one area of my life is managing expenses. And another area is prayer. And another area is my food habits. So discipline is helpful no matter what area you involve it in your life. So I just think if you can manage your expenses and set aside a percent for giving, you're already on your way. So when I started managing my expenses, I knew 10% was giving. And then the other 90% I could live off, except that I had debt. So now I want to live off of 70% of my income, 20% towards savings and debt management, and 10% towards giving. So I see how discipline can be applied to reach those buckets. And Julian and Kirsten Sanders said most of your money is being eaten up by housing, transportation, and food. So I did housing and transportation, and now I have to use discipline for food. Anybody can do that. But the missing ingredient is discipline. And guess what? The key to discipline is just consistency. To be able to do it day in and day out, no matter how you feel. And if you can do that over time, then it'll feel kind of weird if you're not being consistent. And that's how you know you got it. So I've learned a lot while I was making this video for the audience, but also for me. Because now I know I can retire whenever I want if I can include discipline as a wealth building habit. And that's why a lot of my posts end with wealth mentality is discipline. Thank you for joining me, and assalamu alaikum. Good night.